Good morning, everybody. So, our company at Verichains, we discover multiple vulnerabilities in the TSS libraries. And now I'm going to present to you TSSHOCK, cracking MPC wallets and digital custodians for billions of profits. So, what is this talk about? We have private key extraction attacks in popular GG18, GG20 based threshold signature scheme implementations, a multi-party computation protocol. So you have a lot of these new vocabulary. So we're going to learn them one by one, starting with multi-party computation. So multi-party computation is kind of like distributed computing, but now you have private values. So we have a lot of parties here. Each of them have a private inputs, and you need them to jointly compute something. And the thing is, the private input must be kept private by each party. One application of that is the threshold signature scheme, which is a jointly computation of digital signatures with private shares. Now, the private shares here, you can say that is a key shares. So each party now has a part of a key in a digital signature. And then when they talk together, they will generate a signature, but the private key is never constructed. Now it has another attribute, is that it's threshold T over N party. So that, like say you have 4 party here, but you say that this is a scheme for 2 over 4. So which means that you must have 2 people talking together to effectively generate a signature. So this is still very general. We have a more specific one for ECDSA. That is proposed by Goldfeder and Gennaro in GG18 and GG20. It is a TSS for ECDSA. It is well known in the industry. It has multiple revisions. It has a lot of open source implementations. And the part is, it is being widely used in production. So, what is this GG18, GG20 is built on? So, it's actually, this is a very high level. So we have the threshold ECDSA, which is proposed by GG18, GG20. It has the sub-protocol called MTA. And to make this MTA works, it must be protected by some sort of a range proof. And to protect this range proof, you need to have a DLN proof. This is a kind of an overview of what protect what. So we go into each of these. And in the MTA, which is actually being used in the signing process, so you don't need to understand what's above, what below. You only need to know that we have Alice and Bob here. And during the signing protocol, they will perform MTA sub-protocols. So what sub-protocols for the MTA is actually very simple in idea. So Alice has a private value A. Bob has a private value B. Now, the MTA protocol processes and gives out Alice a value alpha and gives Bob a value beta, such that A multiplied to B will equal to B alpha plus B. Now, this has to do with a lot of complex math. And this A and B is actually being encrypted because it has to go with homomorphic encryption something. So this A value and B value, they must be in a certain range. So you cannot say A must be 1, A must be 0. It has to be some value in some range. So it needs a range proof. So a range proof in the MTA sub-protocol is actually has a lot of things, but we only focus right here. So we have the key generation, where Alice will send Bob 3 random values that Alice generates. And Bob will also send Alice 3 random values that Bob generates. And during the signing process, Alice will send to Bob her values A, but in some form like Z equal to H1 of Bob, power to the A of Alice, multiplied to the H2 of Bob, to some random values that Alice generates at that signing process, announce, and mod to the N tilde of Bob, and Bob receives the same thing. So we take a look at one side, like this. Now Alice has N tilde H1, H2. and Alice will receive Z, like the formula, with X is the private value of other party, and rho is the random nonce of the other party. So the idea here is that X should not be revealed. As we said earlier, that MTAs has the input to be very sensitive data, so it should not be revealed. So how do we do this? Well, there's a lot of ways to do this, but in the protocol, it says that H1 must be in a multiplicative subgroup generated by H2. So what does that mean? That means H1 is equal to H2 power to some E. And then we'll have Z will be H2 to the power of EX plus the random rho and mod to the N tilde. Now, if rho is really big, then X cannot be revealed. And if X is not revealed, then everything works fine. But to do this, we need an enforce that H1 must be equal to H2 to the power of E. And how do we know that? Is that Alice must somehow tell the other party that, hey, H1 is really actually H2 to the power of E, but you cannot say what E is. So it requires a zero knowledge proof of the discrete log of H2 base and H1 mod to the N tilde. So to do this zero knowledge proof, there's an algorithm, and this is the DLN proof. So we go to understand what DLN proof is. It's actually quite simple. It's kind of like this. We have the prover and a verifier. Now the prover has the N tilde, the phi of N tilde, H1, H2, and the log because he knows the log. The verifier knows the N and H1, H2. And now the prover will have to convince the verifier that he knows the log. So the algorithm goes, okay, I'm gonna select a random value and I'm gonna send to verifier which H2 equals to some random rho. And then the verifier will ask, okay, let's reveal me rho or reveal me rho plus the log. And then it will check if it's accept, which is like that. It's just accept. And this protocol has to repeat multiple times because it's just C, it's just only 0 or 1. So the prover can just pretend that it's the correct value or 0 or 1. So it has to be repeated multiple times. And in here I say it has to be repeated at least 80 times. But all of this is interactive, which means that you have to talk to the other people and the other people will have to talk back to you. So it's not really good to build program using this kind of interaction. So you apply Phi-Ashami heuristic, which turns an interactive into a non-interactive version. So in this case, you have the challenge to be a hash of the public values so that the verifier, when it receives, it can calculate the challenge. And because the hash is kind of a random, so it works. So what is TSSHOCK, right? TSSHOCK is actually we attack in this DLN proof. And because we attack this, then the range proof can, well, be broken. And then it broken the MTA, and if broken the MTA, we can break the threshold ECDSA in this scheme, and we extract private key. So let's talk more in details. So we found implementation weaknesses in DLN proof that allow us to forge proof. And for these weaknesses, we found 3 attacks. The attacks are alpha shuffle, C-split, C-guess. And all of the attacks can recover the private key. And what's more shocking is that you only need one malicious party, which is, as I said before, you need a threshold, right? It's a threshold ECDSA. You need T over N party. But now, you only need one party, and you can collect the private key. And the protocol will not abort when you attack. So, and this is not even shocking to you right now. I'm going to tell you one more that's shocking, that when we review this, most implementation that is open source is affected. So which means like, if you are a person who building the MPC thing on this open source, then I guess you are vulnerable. And even more shocking is that it's actually being used in production. In MPC wallets, asset custodian, decentralized bridge, all of these using in production. So we will go through all the attacks. We have the alpha shuffle first. So as a hacker, when you see this, can you tell me what's wrong with this? Right? Okay, so what's wrong is that this value here, what if you encoded that and that it has the delimiter bytes in it? Yeah, that is some ambiguous encoding scheme. It's kind of look like this. So you have these 6 values, right? But one of them could be interpreted like this. So we have this value right here. It has a delimiter. So back in 2019, there's an audit. When they see this, they say, yeah, this is wrong. So you're gonna have to fix it like this. Yeah, so they append the length of values in the front. But they don't realize that the problem is still the same, because it's just like this. It's the same. It's the same thing. So when we see this, we were like why people just using this? Like, why cannot they see this? And then we found a way to attack this. So I'm gonna put the algorithm here. I'm gonna say, so the basic idea is that I'm gonna guess how many bits of 0 and 1 in the challenge. And then I'm gonna generate alpha so that you see here, this is alpha 0, and this is alpha 0 with the delimiter in the middle will be alpha 1. And we will take a guess, so how many bits of 0 and 1, we will generate a dummy value, we send that, and if we return that, for C, we know how, if we guess correctly, like we guess 3 bits of 0, and if the return result, we have 3 bits of 0, then we can say, okay, it is correct, but it may be not in the correct order, so we will reorder that. Okay, so I guess you don't understand this algorithm right now, but I have an illustration which works easier. So let's say we have 4 challenge bits. And at first, we don't know anything, but we take a guess, so say we have 2 0 bits. And then we send a dummy value. Okay, alpha 0, alpha 0, alpha 1, alpha 1. We send them, and then we return back the challenge bit to be 1, 0, 0, 1. And we count the bit of 0. We have 2 bits of 0, which is correctly with what we guessed, right? And then, okay, but it is not in the correct order, right? So we're gonna change it back to be alpha 1, alpha 0, alpha 0, alpha 1. And then we're gonna send that back. And because it's the same, right? It's the same thing. So we have the correct challenge bit. And with the correct challenge bit, we can forge the DON proof. That is the basic idea of the alpha shuffle. So the next part is that we're gonna talk about the C-split. C-split is actually a problem arise when you use a larger challenge space with no DON proof iteration. So this is what they fixed. So remember before, C was only 0 or 1. But now, say, yeah, let's take C to be something very, very big. And you don't repeat anything of it. It might seem sound at first. But if we look at this formula right here, and we just ask to ourselves, what if this log is 1/2? And C is an even number, then it can be calculated. We generalize this, and we say, okay, let this log be 1 over E. And C divides by E, then it can be calculated. But you know what? That E right there may not exist. It only exists if E has an inverse in that group of phi and tilde. But what if it's not? So 1 over E is actually not exist in this case. But if C divides by E, then C multiplied to that log is actually a valid number, but the log is not valid. So this is really crazy, right? But how do we exploit that? We say, okay, if we use the file Shamir thing and we hashed everything, right? Then we can just brute force C. And we have a probability for a successful calculation is 1 over E. So take this and we say, okay, let's C be a very small, E be a very small number, 30 to 50 bits based on your computing power. And you can brute force that. And when you brute force that, you can extract the private values. But the extracted value is in the mod E. And because of E is so small, just only 30 bits, 50 bits, and the X is actually really big. So you have to collect multiple signatures value that it has a lot of them, and then you can combine them to recover the full private value. So this is kind of similar to the non-leakage attack on ECDSA where we use lattice attack. So here is the brute force. You see, we can choose a small number E somehow, and let's just say E is not inverse in the M tilde, and then we can multiply H2. We can power H1 to E to get the H2, and then we just calculate and check if the C hash is divided by 0. And then we can output that. But if you want to brute force this, there are some things that you need to consider, is that file thing, that file mod right there is actually an expensive algorithm, expensive operation. So you have to modify this algorithm if you want to make this faster. You may use GPU to hash this. So you can say we're finding alpha incrementally, right? H2 to the power of 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can say we can GPU that to do it parallelly. So we can say H2 to the power of 1 to 10 and H2 to the power of 11 to 20 and so on. We can use hardware because this hash is sometimes, it's very commonly used, is the hash of SHA 256, which we have hardware that effectively calculate the hash. So if we can do that, we can just use the hardware, calculate the hash, and we can have it with random alpha, and then we can discrete log to get the raw values. And the last attack, the C-guess, is actually a reduction of DLN proof iterations only. So it's just the same, but like let's say it's not repeat 80 times at least, it's just repeat fewer times, maybe repeat 1 time, maybe repeat 5 times, 10 times. So if you have very low number of that, then you can guess it, and the probability for a successful guess is 1 over 2 to the power of iteration. And you can have sorry. Okay, let's recap. So for the recap, we have 3 attacks: the alpha shuffle, the C guess, and the C split. The bug corresponding to the alpha shuffle is the ambiguous encoding scheme, because it has the same encoding for different integers lists. The C guess is the reduction of DLN proof iterations, which you can easily guess that. You can just brute force that. For the C split, it uses a larger challenge space with no DLN proof iteration. This is because they optimize the scheme, but they did not prove that the soundness is still good. So they optimize, but they don't prove that the security is the same. But in actually, the security is worse. So we have the attack summary here. So the proof of existence can now be forged. So which means that we have the enforced relation, right? Like H1 must be to H2 to the power of some E is not guaranteed anymore. which means that we can inject malicious parameters into this formula z equal h1 to the x multiplied to h2 to the rho mod n tilde, which means that if we have some values that we are tinkering with that, we can leak x. Now, how do we leak x? We start with some very basic leak. Okay, if we say h2 equals to 1, which is really easy, right? H2 equal to 1, 1 to the power of anything equals to 1. Then we only have z will be equal to h1 to the power of x. And then we can just log it. Now, but sometimes, life is not that simple. h2 equal 1 may be rejected. So we have a more advanced leakage, okay? So let's say h1 is equal to h2 is equal to h1 to the power of e mod the n tilde for some e that is divisible by order of h1, and then we set f to be order of h1 over e. Now, if we power them to f, we have this thing, right? And if we expand that, we can see that h1 to the power of e multiplied to rho order that e will be eliminated, and then we'll have h1 to the order of h1 to the order power of rho. And h1 to the power of order of h1 is actually equals to 1, because any number power to the order of its number will be 1. So we have this left. And if we have this left, we can easily log that out. Now, this log is actually in the mod of e, because the order of h1 to the f is equal to e. But we are not complete yet. Because why? Because this discrete log mod is actually very hard. Unless we choose that n tilde to be something that computes that discrete log easier. So it could be that n tilde to be equal to some square, or the phi of n tilde is a smooth number, which means that n tilde equal, phi of n tilde will equal to p1, p2, p3, p3, and a lot of number multiply to each other. Or that we can say that n tilde will be equal to p tilde multiplied to q tilde for very small p tilde, so that the discrete log problem can now be reduced into the discrete log into the p tilde. So now you know like how to leak x, right? So how the attack works. So this is the attack flow. At the key generation process, we will generate h1, h2, n tilde according to the vulnerability. And then we will broadcast h1, h2, and n tilde with the forged DON proof. And the other party will accept that, because the DON proof for that malicious h1, h2 is accepted as per the attack. And then at the signing process, as a malicious party, you will receive z equal h1 to the power of x multiplied to h2 to some rho with x of other parties, right? And because you have the malicious party, malicious parameters, then you can recover x for each z. And in the protocol, if you have those secret values, you can combine that, and then you can recover the private key. And the last step is that you use the private key to gain access to assets. So here are the affected vendors and libraries that we created the PLC for. As you can see, these are very famous libraries and vendors. We have the Binance, we have the ING Bank, we have the Chip Network, we have Multi-Chain. We also have the Zengo here, which is very, very famous libraries named, and we all have the PLC. Now, you can see more in here that the malicious party here, all of them almost won, which means that if in a successful scenario, you only need one malicious party. And you can see here that you only need, you see, signing ceremony, you only need one signing ceremony. So most of the time, if you have a very good big computing power, in this case we say 64 bits, then we can just do something to get into the party, and then after a signing party we get the private key, and then we can just bail out and retrieve all the money without anybody knowing. So for the demo, we will first start with the ING Bank library demo. So this is the running part of the thing. So in this case, we will generate a 2/6 parties. And then for each of the time, we will sign with a random party. We say just signing random. Our party will be the party number 0, and because it's random, so we don't know which party. And then we have the server here. This server will collect when our malicious party it receives the values, it will inject into send out the values here, and then we will periodically check if the private key is recovered. If the private key is recovered, then we will stop the signing process, because we can recover the private key now. So actually the key signing is really long. So right now you can see where we just randomly sign a list of signers here, and we can inject the values, and we just wait until that we find enough signature. You see, we have not enough signature. Because in this case, a POC, we have the E to be only 16 bits. So because of that small bit, so we have to sign more to create more number of that. And but when we have enough of that, we can recover the private key. So you may ask me, like, why do I know that it is correct? So you can see here, when we recover a private key, we will calculate the public key, and we will check that if it is the same with the public key here. So we have the public key, we calculate, we recover, and then we check that, okay, if it is correct, then we say we completely recover the private key. So this is the POC for the ING Bank. And we have another in the production POC for the Tor chain. The Tor chain network. So Tor chain is kind of like the custodian assets. So there's a lot of people joining in the signing and stuff. So we will set up a local node where we have the value, we have the balance of the assets, and then we set up the smart contract to successfully run a local node of Tor chain. And then we have one malicious party, and the other are honest party. And when we complete the POC, we will have a train service that will use the private key to send the money to the malicious actor. So we will create a normal swap transaction to trigger the threshold signing. So this is in the logic. So if you want to swap, then it will go into the above, and then a lot of them will sign. And then because you are a malicious party, when in there you sign a lot of things, you capture the message, and then you can recover the private key. With the recovered private key, you can now have all the assets and move that to another wallet. Now we collect the private key, and we can withdraw that money using a train service. So Okay, so it's processing, and then you can see that there's nothing more. Everything is zero, and we have a lot of money. But in the Asgard thing is just stay the same, but we actually have the assets. So when we send this to Tor chain, they globally halt their mainnet. And at the point of a report, if the POC actually went live, we would have got them $180 million. And we only need one malicious node. This is the KIP network POC. So KIP network on our threshold network is kind of the same. So at first we will create a local node. We will deploy the smart contract for the bridge for on our private stetnet, and then when we run the malicious node, it will issue the key generation. So, and at the key generation, we can inject malicious parameters. You can see here when we start nodes. Now we create a new wallet so that it invokes the key generation. So now we have the key generated. The keys are generated so that the malicious parameters H1, H2, and N tilde is being broadcast to all the other parties. And now we just need to wait for a heartbeat. So in this KIP network, there's always a heartbeat which acts like a signing something. And we can just wait for that to happen. And then if it's close to us, then we can collect. And we will be able to recover the private key. So right here, when we recover the private key, so this POC works. And that is the O3 of our POC. So to bridge it all together, we have a conclusion. So we know that this cryptography, right? Everybody has like now being using cryptography in their products. But it should be remembered that when you implement new and complex cryptography, it is a very challenging task. It's not a trivial task that a normal developer can do. It has to do with engineering and cryptography. So it is very challenging and it's really dangerous because every bug inside of them can be catastrophic. Also that you should not optimize without enough knowledge, without proof, because this is cryptography. Once they create a protocol, they say a set of rules. And if you want to break that rules for some optimizations, that may not end up well, as we've seen in the C-split and C-guess attack. So optimizing cryptographic protocols also a very challenging and dangerous task. And we all know that new cryptographic protocols, they must undergo a lot of being tested, being reviewed, and being hacked to say that, this is good to be used in production. And the same thing with MPC and TSS. But MPC and TSS, like say GG18, GG20, it's been proposed in 2018, right? And it's been 5 years now. But there's still no standardizations, which means that there's no documents saying like how you should do There's no standard library that like OpenSSL where everybody, if we want to use cryptographic protocol, you should use that. So we should expect that there's a lot to be changed. And also that because it's a new, so nobody like clearly understand what it is. So in MPC, in TSS, you have homomorphic encryption, you have zero knowledge proof. Those are very new. And maybe it could have some vulnerabilities that you don't know. And but we can be sure that right now we test this library. We have also other companies testing, auditing these libraries. So we can be sure, like not really sure, but maybe in 5 more years or 10 more years, this can be more secure and we can use it without like we can use it without being fear that somebody can attack you and get your money. So this is the end of our talk. I will be open for some Q&A. If you want more information, we have published a page here, Verichains.io TSSHOCK. In here we have our white paper, our slides that we talked this at BlackHat before. We have the slide for BlackHat, not the slide for HITB. And we also have a repo for the POC. But the repo for POC is actually on my fork because some organizations on GitHub, I cannot push to that, but this is on my fork. So you can check out the fork. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go to the Q&A. Are there any questions from the floor before we go into lunch? Is there 1 or 2? Okay.
Yeah, great talk. What is the most common way for a vendor to patch the TSS-related vulnerabilities?
What is the common
for the vendors, how do they normally patch the vulnerabilities?
Most of the common way is that actually these libraries, they have audits, and when they receive the audits of even some small warnings, they still fix that. So it depends on the audits, but right now, MPC, we have the most company that doing audits is the Kudelski. They do a lot of audits on this TSS thing. So most company, most libraries, when they got audited by that company, is like really trusted. If they say something's wrong, then they will fix that.
There are many closed source MPC provider. Do you think they are vulnerable to this kind of bugs?
So we don't really know about closed source implementations because we can only look about the open source implementation. So this is actually a very interesting question because TSS is actually a new thing. So a lot of companies, they want to do TSS MPC thing, but they don't want to be perceptible to, like, if they release open source and then somebody can just say, okay, so I found this vulnerable, and then they attack that. So it's kind of a really hard thing to know, and really we don't know about closed source, but maybe they are wiser to a lot of people that they close their source and they audit internally. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hello. From one of your slides, there is one case that it required two malicious party, right?
Yes.
Can you elaborate? Yes. Why is this case different from the rest? And what kind of communication that maybe require that two parties share with each other?
I really don't really know about why in this case it's like two malicious party, but a lot of these they have to do with very complex communication, the MTA protocol. So some implementation, I say the private inputs, right? So we have three values, the K, the gamma, and the W. So implement some implementation, they just do like two part of them, like maybe K and W and K and gamma is the standard that you have to do with KW and K gamma, but for some of them we have to do KW only.
So they have to share with each other. Like
yeah, so it's kind of like a different implementation, but it's still good. It's still sign the message, but the way they do it is kind of like really not what it should be like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay. So thank you again, and Khoa Nguyen. One more round of applause for TSSHOCK, breaking MPC wallets and digital custodians.